Hello there. Welcome to Develop, and welcome to the BAFTA panel on social mobility in the games industry. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Luke Hebblethwaite. I'm the head of games at BAFTA. And BAFTA is, presumably you all know us from our awards, but you may not realize that we are an arts charity, and our role is to support the arts and craft of making games, celebrating its cultural and creative value to society, and also its charitable remit to support a progressive industry and supporting new talent within the sector. As part of that, we wanted to have a moment here to shine a light on an increasingly important topic in our industry, and one I think will become a key topic for the future, looking at social mobility in the games industry. I've got three great panelists here to help me unpick some of that, Danny, Gina, and Ty. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. But today's format, we're going to have about 30 minutes discussion between ourselves, and I'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. I hope you've all got some burning questions, and I hope you'll all pick up a lot. So do keep your thinking caps on throughout. I think it's clear, looking at social mobility, when I was at UK, I ran the UK Games Industry Census, and the data in that was very clear that the UK games industry skews quite heavily towards people whose parents come from professional managerial backgrounds, which is one of the sort of ways that these kind of your sort of socioeconomic background is measured, and also a disproportionate number of people going to selective or fee-paying schools. So this issue became more pronounced as well as you rose up through seniority within businesses. So it seems to be clear that there is an issue with social mobility, not just in entering the industry, but also progression through the sector. So they're hopefully some of the things we'll get to discussing today. So but I'm going to, before I go any further, ask my panel to introduce themselves. Danny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Danny. I'm Chief Creative Officer at Us2 Games, mostly known for Monument Valley, and we did Alborough Wildlife Adventure recently and Assemble with Care. Been there almost 10 years at this point, so long time.
That was really succinct. I'm Gina. I've made quite a lot of games, probably around 300 games. Now do a lot of stuff in skills. I'm often the token woman on a panel. Just saying. Although not from a working class background. God, if only I could tick more boxes. And now I rant on a lot about skills and the lack of skills, and particularly around career changes. I run game dev boot camps, which is about doing boot camps for career changes to bring them into industry.
Yeah, I'm Ty. I was a YGD BAFTA nominee in 2019, so I've been working in the industry for about 3 years now, at places like PlayStation, Sumo, and now Silver Rain. And yeah, I'm also a uni student still as well. So.
Achieving a lot already early on. So yeah, really, I think when we're going to talk about social mobility, there's a few things to think about. It's a topic that I think can feel a little vague. So we're going to talk about the creative and human impacts and what that really means to businesses and the creative process. Hearing about the voices that we're not hearing from around the table, the intersections with other areas, and who else we might be reaching by discussing this that might be underserved by current intervention methods. Thinking about those barriers that exist, whether in terms of entry or in progression, and how we might better target our efforts across the industry to relieve some of that and help people progress. So, Danny, I wanted to start with you, really, thinking about, we've talked a lot about it previously, like that creative impact. I think, when we talk about social mobility, it can feel a little bit, we all know it's a good thing and we want to do it, but like what the impacts it has on a business, and what the impacts, particularly being, a creative industry and producing creative outputs, where you see social mobility impacting that, and maybe some of the sort of the decision making in the creative process and where that might fit in.
Yeah, so if you imagine, especially if you're making mobile games, right? You're trying to make a product for a broad range of people. So the best thing you're trying to do is have a broad range of people create that thing, right? So you can actually grab all the decision points and all the discussions and have the right people in the room to make the right decisions for all the people. So that, goes beyond social mobility. It goes into lots of other stuff. But I think what happens as well is the best analogy I can come to is, imagine if music was only made by middle class and upwards people. It'd be rubbish. We'd just be listening to like James Blunt and stuff, right? That would be the state of what certain elements of me would be like if they only acted like games did. So we just got to think about the amount of experiences and the cool stuff we're all missing out on because certain groups of people, and not just from working class or low income background, lots of different types of people are not in a position to have power or influence over the things that go out. So to me, that's from a creative perspective, that's the main thing that it's just sad we're missing out on, all this cool stuff, but hopefully be there in the future, but it's not really there right now.
And so what do you think, like, kind of practical examples of that might be in terms of the creative design of a game? We're not creating music, so that's something we might all be able to reflect on. But like in terms of game making, where do you think examples of where we're not hearing those voices might impact elements of the game design or the craft itself?
Yeah, so like an example, we announced the new game I'm working on called Desta: The Memories Between at some Games Fest a couple of months ago, and this is the first time I've managed to have a little bit of freedom to go, you know what, it's set in Manchester and the characters within it are mostly from a working class background. There's some cool stuff that we can do with that, right? So I recently had a baby, so I went on paternity leave for a little bit, kind of like mid-project. And when I left, we were talking about the different environments and biomes that we could make. And I was like, really want a street that Desta grows up on, right? So I left him a Miro board full of all these reference images of like red brick terraced houses and stuff, and little ginnels that they can throw this ball game around in the back. And I left them to it and said, right, street biome is one of the biomes. And I come back and it looks like a village in Surrey, right? but it's because different people are going to have a different interpretation of what street means, right? Like equally, if you're from London, street, even if you're from a working class background, street might mean a different thing depending on where you grow up. So if you don't have the right people in the room, you're going to end up only making games in English villages, or no matter where you are in the world, right? Like different people are going to interpret it in different ways. So it does genuinely, it comes up throughout the creative process in terms of interpretation and what you want to make. That's what I find anyway. And
so do you feel, I guess if you look at, say, filmmaking and TV, I think we see perhaps more representation on screen there of, thinking about the works of Shane Meadows or someone like that, where, he's able to dig into kind of those kind of stories, but also reflect the environments and the kinds of people you see in I guess, working class backgrounds or other. And perhaps, and in some way finds the beauty in it, and finds that, your rundown alleyway behind your brick houses in Manchester is beautiful to you. You grew up, there's so many stories, that environment. And so perhaps that's, something we're missing quite a bit of in games.
Yeah, and you're not doing it, you're capturing that magic because it's genuine to you. Like you're not doing it in a kind of voyeuristic third-party way where you've gone, isn't it great that we're going to set this game somewhere that none of us actually have any experience in, right? Or as a life experience or a story that we're doing from a third-party perspective. So, same goes with many aspects of identity and creation, that the best way to make something genuine is to have someone in control that can influence those things, right?
Yeah, and I think you'd even see it in, if you're creating, I don't know, cyberpunk or whatever, it's like you're trying to represent different people within that world. Yeah. And so you're always...
Whereas we need to hire cyberpunks, clearly.
Well, I think that would help. There's plenty of them in the games industry, I am sure. But I think it's,
Can I just add a question? Do you think if we have a publicly funded publisher who would do different kinds of projects that were maybe more risky, we could change maybe some of the stories that are coming through?
I mean, you see some, I know that BBC's had a slam in more recent years, but yeah, if you had a publisher that could be more representative of the stories of the people of the country, that would be the most amazing thing. And I know those things try to get incentivized, at least from like a region basis with things like the tax credits and how all that kind of stuff works, but it's not the same, right? Like a lot of people end up, because we're making a lot of fantasy stuff, you kind of retrospectively go, yeah, it's definitely British, even though they're not. So yeah, that'd be amazing.
And so Gina, I guess, talking about, you've got a world of experience across, in businesses and also at the sort of broader skills level and looking at industry interventions. I think if we're in a world where anyone can make games because all you need is a laptop and the internet, why can't we get anyone a job in games?
Well, we were. When I started in 92, we were a working class industry. We were people dropping out of education and creating companies, and that's what we were. And we've moved ourselves and excluded people who were like the people who started the industry. It's bizarre that we've put up these massive walls and say, well, you can only come and do coding if you've been to university. But I might be a CTO and I might be self-taught, but actually I'm not going to give that any kudos anymore. I want you to come through a route that I didn't come through. But why? no one can really say why. Are we feeling that we can't take risks anymore, which is maybe why we're not hearing any voices? It seems to me really strange that we've created this. Go on.
So in thinking of that, I guess, like you say, it's perhaps a risk aversion that you need to be sure that people can do the job, I suppose. But like what you're getting to there, I think, is starting to unpick this kind of idea between, obviously we need someone to be able to do the task. So if it's coding, they need to be able to do coding. But like, I guess it's an education requirement versus a strong portfolio, or perhaps sort of broader lived experience, and how those bring to the table their own value, I think, but they do provide an equal level of skill potentially.
So I think one of the barriers we put up is through the way that we do recruitment, and I think part of that is because so many people apply for lots of jobs, and therefore we have to find a way of sifting them, and that becomes very difficult. And are we looking at just portfolios? And I'd love to hear. I'm not having a go at recruiters, because their job's very hard, especially at the moment. But how do we create routes in? I ran a boot camp recently, and guys were becoming career changers, and they'd worked 6 weeks on projects, and they ran up companies, and they said, if I apply for this job, will you look at my CV, even though I've only got 6 weeks of experience, because I've got 10 years of other experience, and I think I'm bringing something really interesting to the table. People said, yeah, we'll look. People then applied, and within 10 minutes they'd been rejected because it didn't get through the system. So I think if people are really serious about changing things, we need to look at how we change the way that we deal with talent coming in. And that means money, and that means time, and that means effort. Really interesting to see Sumo yesterday release their internship, where they're looking for different people and a diversity of people coming in. But again, that's at low level, that's at new entrants, which is brilliant. But if you look at the figures, we're currently hiring 10% of our workforce every month, and 95% of those are mid to senior level. So this is lovely, we're doing this stuff here, but our problem's over here, and we're saying no to all these people who could be coming in and diversifying our workforce, bringing in new ideas and new voices, but also new skills and new talents. Why are we saying no?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to come back a little bit more on that as well in a second, I think. But Ty, I wanted to firstly welcome you to you're fairly new to the games industry, so thank you for letting me throw you right in at the deep end here. But Ty has come up through our BAFTA Young Games Designer program and is doing, making his first sort of strides in the industry. I want to think about, being new to this and having gone through kind of education and stuff recently. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about your experience and sort of your journey so far. You come from Liverpool, and my understanding is you had to move schools in order to kind of follow your dream to make games. I just wondered if you could give a little background on that.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't always I haven't been in a rich family or anything. My mum was 18 when she had me, single, and there wasn't really education about games being a viable option. It always kind of seemed this thing that, some people do, but you're not realistically going to be able to do it as a job. And so I got to the end of my GCSEs, and I was kind of it's really something I want to do, but might not be realistic or possible. So I had to switch schools, and there's this incredible school in Liverpool called the Studio School. And they actually really focus heavily on the tech sector, getting you involved in networking and talking to people from industry and actually getting you in. Whereas a lot of other people I've spoke to, and especially in my uni, there's kind of this barrier where they haven't been taught about networking or about the job opportunities and stuff. So I feel we are missing something in a lot of schools and in education.
And that's quite an early stage, isn't it? I think, making a decision when you're 17, 16 to move schools and, leave your friends behind. I guess that must have been quite a challenge in that sense, emotionally and all of that kind of thing. It's quite a brave thing to do. And I think that would be off-putting to a lot of people. And you said that, you could perceive the games industry being out there in the UK, which is great. It means we are getting out there a little bit, but it was seen quite inaccessible, I think, that you didn't know how to then find that role. That you'd say would be true of the other people at your school who might have been interested in your friends and so forth?
Yeah, definitely. I've actually spoke to a lot of people who they ended up going down more of a computer science path. But a lot of them wanted to come and do games design, but they didn't think that they'd be able to get into it. And, they didn't. I've heard people whose parents and stuff were it's not a job that you can go anywhere with. which is clearly not true.
And so coming, then through the studio school, getting into our young game designer program and going through that competition and becoming a finalist, and congratulations. Like, what did that process, and that kind of, that's an intervention designed to get young people into the industry and thinking about games. Like, what kind of did you learn along the way, regardless of becoming a finalist and all of that kind of stuff, but like the structure, I guess, of it, what did that help teach you that you wouldn't have got otherwise?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was like kind of getting recognition for the effort and stuff that you're putting in, and then being able to talk to people in our industry and learn about, their paths into it. It like solidified that, yeah, this is a career path that I can go into, and if I apply myself, then yeah, there's a place.
So it created that network and those opportunities, and gave you that kind of structure and that experience, and perhaps also some of those soft skills. In that we kept dragging you to events like this, and and getting you out there, but meeting people and okay, great.
Can I ask Ty a question?
Yeah,
Sure. I'm interested because you're a bit younger than me. Like, I imagine it's just the same. When you were 16, for example, you might be trying to figure out what you wanted to do. Did you have people around you that were just telling you to be a bit more conservative with your choice? Like, make sure you go and do IT, or make sure you go and pick an industry where you're more certain to get a job. You're never going to get a job in games. That's impossible. Just set your sights lower. Did that happen when you were?
Yeah, I heard that from like quite a few teachers and stuff, and it's like, it might not be a thing that like you can go into. But the person who always told me to just go for my dreams has been my mum.
Yeah,
she's been like,
that's the big difference. That's the same with me with my mum.
Yeah. Like, she just went, do whatever you want to do. You can be working in like, Tesco or something, as long as you're happy with what you do.
And that's the biggest difference between, say, that and going to a private school, where a lot of the time that feeling of being instilled with the confidence to go and try anything, or go and try and grasp anything, or try a different industry. It's why it's so important to have people to go and speak at schools and show people that it is possible.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So when you went to ask people how they got into the industry, were you surprised at what they said? Did you think there was like a single route in, and did everyone have totally different routes?
Yeah, well, I didn't think there were so many different routes that, you could go into industry. I was like, okay, I've got to do this, and then I've got to go to sixth form, and then I've got to uni, and then, get into industry that way. But there's people who have came from like, work with someone who used to like design theme park rides and stuff like that, and then they've moved into the games industry, and like there's so many different ways in, and that was really surprising to me. I was kind of just told, go here, go this way, and follow this path. But,
And Gina, that's something I wanted to come back to you about. I think there's this myth in our industry that you've got to make it by the time you're 22. You've got to have had your hit indie darling, smash hit and all the rest of it, and be young and dynamic and versatile and do all the things and be in the 30 under 30 lists, or that's it. And I think that's not true at all. I didn't join the games industry until I was comfortably into my 30s, but I think that's true of a lot of other people. But I think when we talk about, you mentioned a bit about changing careers and bringing people in from other sectors, if it seems odd to me that if you were your social aspects, the social mobility aspects, maybe you couldn't access games when you were younger, so you went and got some other job, you did computer science, and you went and worked in, Jaguar Land Rover or something, I don't know, pick a thing. And then we still seem to now exclude those people because they didn't get started in games earlier. So they couldn't join at the start, and now we're kind of excluding you later. And perhaps we need to do more in that area.
We certainly need to do more. The Jaguar Land Rover is actually someone who came off my boot camp, who would have been here today if he didn't break his leg playing football. There's a lesson to us all. So yes, I think, and again, it's about that recruitment, but also when people get in, I think we need to support them. Maybe BAFTA could do a really nice mentoring program, perhaps, for people who are career changers, to give people support that's just not coming from their company, that they get industry support, so that we can all, if we all agree that we should have more social mobility, could support people who are coming in from different routes to say, actually, we do want you here. This brick wall we've created that says you're not welcome isn't actually true. We didn't mean to create that. We were just being risk averse. So actually, if you're moving in from different sectors, we want to support you with understanding everything that we do and why you're valuable. Back to your things about, the design aspect of it. Yeah. Why is that diverse workforce so important?
That's because it's right on a number of bases, right? It's like, obviously on a moral perspective, everyone would agree with that. But it's also okay to say it's right on a business perspective as well, like it's not just one side of it.
Yeah, so I think, that, once you're in aspect is also, we talked about career progression, I think, as well. But like, Danny, I'm thinking, being a creative leader in a company and trying to build your workforce and so forth, how do you go about thinking about this as a business? If you're thinking about recruitment or the makeup of your country, you've got to, you've got industry data out there, but like looking at that internally, it's quite an unusual question perhaps to be asking at the recruitment level, and getting that question right. It's quite a delicate topic, and I just wondered if you had any sort of thoughts and experience of that.
Yeah, so like a month ago when I was kind of stressing out about this a little bit, I sat down and did just a bit of a manifesto to like propose to the company, and I'm probably going to post it all on Twitter at some point. But when you sit down and you actually think about the tangible actions that you can do, there's a whole bunch of stuff, right? So even from an early access point, are you paying people to do your code tests? Like, are you providing relocation support? Like, I only got my first job in games. I moved down from Manchester to Surrey to go and work at Lionhead because I happened to have a girlfriend who lived in Essex, and then I traveled from Essex to Guildford every day. Like, I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford a deposit or anything otherwise. So are you providing the right finances to make sure that anyone can apply? Like, even if you've got a junior level position, can you provide like a laptop loan for somebody to do it? It's something that blows people's minds that you might not have access to the hardware to even apply for a job. Are you asking the right questions as part of the interview process? But I think part of it as well is kind of talking about it a lot internally. Like, games ends up with a very international workforce, right? Mm-hmm. So when you start saying the words working class to someone who's from a completely different part of the world, people start to need to understand a little bit more, or they want to ask questions.
About our crazy entrenched class system.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think a lot of the questions that have been created as part of the interview process that I know are on like Social Mobility Foundation and a lot of the stuff like that, and the things that UK have used as part of the survey process are really important ways to do that. But like, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can do to supply support to make sure different people enter. And
you touched on a thing there that I wanted to ask you about, Ty. So, you talked about, being able to afford a laptop and having that time and money. And I think so there's kind of these hidden barriers that, one of your young game designer colleagues, Jamie Williams, who won this year's game concept for 15 to 18-year-olds, she was actually tweeting, she's at university, and she was tweeting the other day, talking about how she feels the impact on her course, whereas she's having to work and having to work a day job to basically pay her rent and tuition fees and buy her equipment. And there are other people on her course that aren't doing that, so they don't have the same pressures, they don't have the same amount of time. She's got way less time and she's more stressed from work. And I guess is that something you felt quite a bit? Did you see that at university?
Yeah, so I do know a lot of people who have. There's the thing of, you've got all this time, you should be working on your uni, work all the time. But yet there's people who don't have the same the same benefits that a lot of other people do, and yet some people can't afford to get like the right computers or the right equipment, and so they might not be able to work on it at home, or they might not have enough time. And I haven't felt that myself, luckily. But I feel like it is a big thing, and it does.
With the huge cost of going to university these days. Again, back when I grew up, I would never have been able to afford to go to university now. It's crazy. And I similarly, I did a music degree, and it was back in the era of samplers and all that kind of stuff. And people on my course were buying those, and I was like, I don't have a computer. So I was having to put time in at the university and all that kind of stuff.
Can I just add and do a shout out for Creative Assembly, who bought laptops for all the second years on Next Gen Skills Academy course because of digital poverty. And a lot of the Next Gen colleges, so anyone who doesn't know, Next Gen wrote a qualification with industry that goes into FE colleges that have to be approved by industry. And a lot of those colleges are in, if you like, working class areas, Doncaster, St Helens, Middlesbrough, all over the country. And those kids need equipment to be able to work on, and they can produce amazing stuff if you can create the environment in which they can do it. And they're doing that free at FE level. But then you can push that into industry. Apprenticeships are amazing, and they're not just for new starters. So every company can access 13 grand, 19 grand for training, and only have to pay 5% if you don't pay into the levy. We aren't using them at all, and industry are writing them for people to access. So whether that's community management or coding, they're available, and they're going to help us to diversify our workforce more. If you see someone with real talent, but you want to give them some training, and we have a huge mental health issue with our community managers, and Safe in Our World are here, and they do a lot of work around that, but give people training, and you can transform people in a workplace. Imposter syndrome is huge, and I think a lot of it's because people aren't getting in-work training, and we have apprenticeships there, and government are giving this funding, and we're not accessing
Why do you think employers don't access it? What do you think?
I think some of it is fear. They don't know how to do it. It might be complicated. That's not what their aims are in their job. It's unknown. People don't like things that they don't think are made by us, but they are. If anyone's interested in that, just come and talk to me and I'll point you in the right direction. I think apprenticeships are amazing, and we're talking about degree level apprenticeships and master's levels apprenticeships. So these aren't like low level kind of FE or A level standards. These are degree level standards.
Like, I would rather have someone with 3 years in work experience than someone who did my uni course. You know what I mean? Like, mine was rubbish. I'd rather get some tangible, hands-on time.
And they're going to be more loyal,
Yeah.
and you can choose them and you can train them, and they're part of your business.
Yeah, and I think it's some of that stuff as well, like, the somewhat maybe less glamorous, less industry-led initiatives. If you look at like the government Kickstart scheme that's in advertising games jobs in job centres. I used to sign on, and if I'd have gone to the job centre back in Willesden and gone, okay, I want a music job, and they go, hey, there's this sound job at, whatever studio around the corner, I'd taken the hand off. It's absolutely those kinds of, really basic interventions that can really help connect people that otherwise would just have sailed completely past, I think. So I think we've got about 15 minutes. I've got more questions, of course, but if anyone around here has some, if we've got a microphone, which will come to you in a second, but I'm going to ask that you wait for the mic because this is being streamed and we need to be able to hear you on there as well in the room. So we've got a question down front.
Hello. So looking at the UK Census data from this year and 2019, it seems like the percentage of people from working class origins has stayed pretty flat. The numbers, as far as I know, are almost identical there. We're now in a cost of living crisis that's going to disproportionately affect people from those backgrounds. Are we on the cusp of this not staying flat, but actually about to get much, much worse? Thanks.
Yeah, and who would you? So Gina?
Oh, sorry. To anyone on the panel, I guess.
Well, yes, absolutely. It's just going to get worse and worse. Digital poverty is going to get much worse. So, we're an industry who are really generous. Look at all the initiatives we're running. You're running a great environmental initiative. We've got amazing charities. But we can turn this back on ourselves. We're making shed loads of money. COVID was really good for us. It's about time we look back at ourselves and saw how we could help our own society. Yeah. Sorry, I got on my soapbox a little bit.
That's why I brought you on. But yeah, no, I think you're right. It's, there's a lot of goodwill in the industry, and it's about, it's a broad selection of targeted approaches, isn't it? It's not one thing. There's no single magic bullet that can solve it, but it's building out an array of options for, the different businesses and different initiatives will be able to tackle.
Yeah, I was just going to add to it. It's like there is lots of stuff already out there that we could do to tackle those things. But you're right, that if those things don't get implemented everywhere, that number will, it has to drop because people won't have the funds to buy laptops to go to university to do anything else.
Anyone else? We've got some ladies in the middle. In the middle there. If you're going to go a couple of rows back. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for the panel so far. I wanted to ask if you had any examples of things people are doing or ideas for not necessarily recruitment, but retainment of working class people in the games industry. So for a bit of context, I have been at Ubisoft 1 year now as a UX designer. And a lot of that is a lot of being the only woman on the game design team. And I don't know a lot about the other people's backgrounds on the team necessarily, but certainly feeling I have a northern accent. When I'm in my design spirit, I get quite a thick northern accent. And it takes quite a lot of courage sometimes to be in those conversations or to say what I think. And also, again, with the cost of living crisis, the attraction from other industries, as much as I love it, it's deniable simply for higher wages or different conditions. And the degree of working from home helps with that. For example, like working class people being more likely to be in a caring situation or something like that. So I wondered, just about about retainment more and examples of things that people are doing in that context.
Yeah, I guess it's one mainly for me as someone who has control over, over those kind of things, right? I think there's lots of, so say for example, I think individuals, people are going to hate me saying this, I think individuals need to put pressure on their employers to try and address some of those things with the cost of living crisis aspect. Like we've just readdressed some of our salaries mid-year, which we would never usually do. So I think putting pressure on your employers to do things like that. I think on the accent side of things, it's a really hard thing to get around because my accent drifts between being down south and being at home and speaking to Americans. Where do we go from there? Apart from the cost of living crisis and the percentage increase to help tackle inflation, I think, like, does the law of other industries attract people to do that? Yes. I don't even know if I have a particular answer to this in terms of retention. Like, there's all the answers there in terms of getting people in there in the first place. And obviously, you need to make sure that when you're looking at people for things like promotions and internal opportunities, your employer needs to make sure that they're looking at in a well-rounded way. But apart from that, I don't even know if I have the immediate answers right now to answer that question. Which I know is quite sad. Sorry.
Can I just add that?
That's an answer in itself, right?
But some of the accent things are really interesting because when I started at Ocean, my accent was the odd accent out. Everyone else was from Salford and Oldham.
Yeah.
So I totally get where you come from. And that's about people creating safe spaces and making sure that you can be heard in whatever space. So that's about good management. So Ubisoft, good management. You were talking, I think they did that in their keynote. So that's great.
I don't mean to make it sound like it's been a negative experience. I just mean on a broader.
Yeah.
No, but I think people don't realise that that may silence you because you're worried about that. And the more we can talk about it, the more people can understand that and the more people can put stuff in place. Also, Sally Blake's doing some amazing stuff about mentoring. She won an award last year that most people don't know about. I think we need to shout about more stuff that's happening around working class backgrounds.
So much of that confidence, right? Like goes back to confidence. You might feel like I did when I first moved to Guildford and worked at Lionhead and everyone was really Surrey. I felt really insecure about my ideas and I just didn't have the vocabulary or the words in which to express an idea in the same way. I only have my own vocabulary. Whereas if there was a good mentorship program there that said, no, your opinions and what you're trying to say is just as valid as anybody else. Don't try and change your accent. Don't try and change the words you use. And just be proud of what it is. That maybe, you know, I benefit from the fact that I'm a big, tall guy who kind of demands a little bit more attention than other people. That's a privilege that I have. But, you know, a lot of people need some mentorship to boost up that confidence to speak up when they need to speak up.
Anyone got any questions for Ty, perhaps? Yeah, down the front. Thanks, just over here. Yeah, it's not me.
Hello, Ty.
Hey.
Sounds like you're killing it. Congrats, man. So it was something Luke said as well, and kind of talking about your route in as kind of like pushing through networking. And I was just thinking about the route that I've tried to make into the video game industry, and I'm doing an MA at the National Film and Television School at the moment. But before that, I tried to move over from doing tax consultancy to do like a producing role. Didn't work out. And I tried my best in networking. I think if it had worked out, I might have made my way in. But I think my question is, does networking feel like cheating almost? Like, does it feel like a bit of a fast lane that only like a few people can access and get through? And it's not going to be a solution for everyone, is it? Like if we're looking in this chat today about finding the solutions to the big problems.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do you think there is that networking isn't always the answer? I mean, so...
Sometimes I do feel like, it is kind of a little cheat because it's like, oh, well, because I've already made it in, I can talk to this person and then get this opportunity in different places. And especially like going to networking events, especially like with my university colleagues, a lot of people are kind of worried to talk to different people and can have a lot of like social anxiety and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And so, I don't think it is the catch-all solution. I think the solution is getting industry involved and coming to students in particular, and you know, giving them that talk and giving them a bit of confidence. Yeah, I don't know what the solution would be. That's just how I've made it.
Yeah, so I think, you know, in order for networking to work, you've got to be able to access the network. And so that needs, you know, one of the number one bits of advice I give to people when they're saying, how do I get into games? Is go and meet other games people and go and find stuff that's near you. There's games everywhere. You just got to go and find it. But yeah, that can be difficult. And I think much of what we said here, things like imposter syndrome is real, right? And you can walk into that room for all kinds of reasons to not feel like, you know, you're included or find that difficult, you know. And I think, you know, your background is one of those aspects, or it could be any other characteristic. So, you know, I think you're right. It can't be the only answer. And I think this is where I mentioned some of the kind of boring interventions like Kickstarter schemes and this kind of stuff. And the apprenticeships is that other route that potentially enables other, you know, we need to have multiple routes, right? It can't just be, you've got to have met the right person who gave you the push, you know, because that's never going to work at scale. So, yeah.
Can I just, I think we may have talked before. Yeah, we've had so I think part of the challenge with you was actually that people wanted to give you work experience, but they wanted to pay you because they didn't want you to do it for free because they thought that was morally wrong, but they didn't have enough money to pay you to do it. So you couldn't get that work experience because they morally didn't want to not do it unless they paid you. And then you were stuck in that weird cycle. And I hadn't really thought about how that would have affected you, but it's interesting. We need to find a solution to that. Yeah. But it could have been quicker.
You could pull funds from, you know, bigger companies into one central fund that can pay for other people's work experience.
You've got a question up at the back in the middle. I'm just making you run around with the mic, sorry.
We've only got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, we have got 5 minutes, so if we can keep the questions shorter, that'd be great. It's up at the back in the middle, just in front of the desk.
Hi there, fellow Mancunians, that's nice to hear. So one thing I found, I could touch on a lot you've spoken on today, but with the moving from different industries and, you know, getting the talent from other places, one thing I found, having worked in loads of different backgrounds, is when I was looking to get in the game industry, it was this sort of, a lot of people talk to it, this esoteric, we have all these pipelines and processes and such. And when I got in, it was like, oh, no, that's just that, what I did there. That's just that, what I did there. Do you think there needs to be, on an industry-wide scale, a, if not standardization, demystification of all this, some ridiculous terminology sometimes, so people can identify, hey, I can do that. It's just you use a different word for it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of our elitist trying to keep people out that we've become, that we need to stop being. You don't have to come from film and TV, do you?
Nah, I do graphic design,
okay.
Alcohol.
No, I'm just thinking what BAFTA could do here to maybe help film and TV people translate what we do, but maybe we can push that even further.
Like, I know people who work in those industries, and it, like, once you explain what you actually do in the game industry, like, oh, I do that every day. And it's like, yeah, you do. But we just use like we have different terms for roles, for levels. Like, don't get me started on like senior, junior, how different that can be. Find it hard for people to move between work. There needs to be some standardization, because a lot of it is just, it's a bit fetishistic of someone's role.
And so project management is project management, right? It doesn't kind of, there's commonalities across whatever sector you're looking at, you know, or whatever. Yeah, completely agree. Anyone else? Got a question down the front? Sam, in the middle. If we can get the mic. Thank you. This is Don't touch the mics. Hey.
Yeah, hey. So like a lot of the stuff that you've been talking about is like particularly where there's like opportunities for people to sort of meet developers and things like that. They happen in cities. Obviously, we got a lot more things online nowadays, but what do you think we can do to kind of get out to people who don't have access to cities, people who live in remote locations? So.
We were having this conversation before, weren't we? Because remote working wasn't really, like when I started, I tried to, a lot of the studios in the Northwest had kind of 15 years ago had started to kind of drop off, and you hadn't really had the whole indie thing kind of popping off yet. So there was more game studios in Guildford than there was in the northwest of England. But now, like you're saying, your company is just all fully remote. People in different countries all over the place, which should really, really aid that as well, right? In terms of interviewing people, giving different people opportunities. Because yeah, that the regional aspect of having to move in that way just alienates so many people. But I'm hoping that solves a lot of stuff.
Do you think we should, what do you think we should do? Do you think we should have big online networking sessions, maybe branded with a big name, that would help people? I'm just creating a whole to-do list for BAFTA. Would that work?
I think they can help. But like, I suppose one of the other things is like just generally when it comes to opportunity, like in cities. Like I was lucky enough. I have a cousin who lives in London, and like yourself, when I first moved there, it would have been incredibly expensive if I didn't know somebody who could put me up for the first couple of months until I get my paychecks coming through. So I think again, things like that, just realizing what those barriers are that sort of. It's very difficult if you live absolutely in the middle of nowhere or just in the wrong type of city in the wrong kind of part of the country to.
I just think the two things. I think so. One thing we're really trying to do now is trying to figure out the finances of being able to provide loans or other moving support. Because a lot of the time people do moving support from another country, but what happens if you're locally, right? So let's put 1,500, $2,000 on a flat somewhere. So trying to do that, so it's both ends, providing financial support if the company's physical, or providing more spaces for people to network and get to know people in the digital way, I think.
But maybe we need to raise this with Raise the Game, and maybe we can add some more stuff into their toolkit about what people can think about, because sometimes I just think it's ignorance. They're not thinking what they can do. But if stuff's worked for you, we can add some more stuff so that, okay, well, I'll go do that. I'll take that. I'll do that one thing. Everything else is with you, Luke.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it there for this panel, and I'm sorry if we didn't get around to everyone's questions. Do grab any of us to talk about any of this afterwards. We're all super keen to do more in this, and hopefully you can take some of the insights and lessons and ideas and inspirations from today's session and back into your own companies and into your own networks and so forth. And we can all work on this problem together. I mean, that's the ultimate way we're going to solve this. Is, there's no magic bullet. It's all of us working together. So enjoy the rest of your conference. Thank you very much for coming to our panel. I've been Luke Kemble from BAFTA, and this is our